Miles Teller in the movie
live
Hola.
stream preparing
And I
sinigang.
happen to have
So the
written
ingredients.
Hola
Already sauteed the
for
pork.
Ravioli,
Then you
which
have
was played
tomatoes.
by Jonah Hill in the
This
movie
one is
Hola.
kangkong. This
And
one.
so
Then there's this
David
one.
was gracious enough to
And then
memoir
have here
for
string beans,
Ravioli, which
okra,
was
and
played by
labanos.
Jonah Hill
So we have
in the
this
movie
chili.
Hola. And so David was gracious
So we
enough
are
to
now
drive up here
boiling
from Miami and let me
pork.
and I think it's going to be a
Sauteed the
super
pork, and
dynamic
then we
interview.
just
So
added
check it out.
some
Lived in Israel and Jerusalem until I was 8 years old, and then we moved to Miami.
water,
for
and
my
then
dad's
let's
work.
boil it with
To
pork
massage.
sinigang. Sinigang sampag.
$75 an hour, and my friends
How
were making $5 an hour.
Chika,
for minimum wage
kamusta?
jobs. And, you know, the ladies like a guy who's
Bless you,
doing his
Lord.
hands. That helps. As a
Nakauwi ka na?
What were you think? I mean, were you thinking like when you were in high school? What were you thinking you were going to do?
Hindi ka pauwi na.
Right.
You know, actually, the massage school.
Yeah.
Oh, this is it for me. I'm going to be a massage therapist.
No, good. No, so I was in college.
Nakauwi
I
lang
went
din
to
namin.
massage
Hi,
school
Nang.
to support
Mamsi.
myself while I was in university.
Hi, Jess.
I was studying
Nagluluto ako
chemistry at
sinigang.
university. And I also
Kanina
had
pa namin
other
tinatry
side
i-figure out
businesses
ano
that I was
nangyayari
doing.
dito sa ano.
So I first got
Ay,
into
Almost yeah, you were already bidding on government
Baka
contracts.
life na.
Contracts,
Hello,
yeah.
sis Aba.
Yeah, it was a great
Kamusta?
time. It wasn't government contracts. It was so I started. The way it started was
Anong lunch niyo, Jess?
starting when I got my first digital
Kasi ka
camera.
nakuha.
And I realized SD cards were super expensive, and so I kept looking for a cheaper SD card. And then I realized I
For
needed to buy
lunch,
them
sis
in
Aba.
order to get it real cheap. And I realized I could sell the rest of them on eBay and make some money. And so I started doing that, importing SD cards from China, doing larger and larger volumes, selling them on eBay, doing pretty well.
Nagluluto pa lang ako
And then a
ng
friend of
lunch,
mine
Jess.
tells me,
Gaan to,
oh,
ang
you know,
bilis ka live.
it seems like you know how to
Kinadlaw siya.
source things internationally.
Louis is watching my live stream and then
I
Louis
have
is
a
laughing.
bedsheet
That's funny.
business that I
Baby
sell
back.
bedsheets and towels and
Hey, Lou!
items like
What are you
patient
doing,
gowns and things
Lou?
like that to nursing homes. So if you could get me a
Ah,
better
wala
price
si
than my
Louis ba?
distributor, I'll buy from you. So I started looking for manufacturers for that and found better prices than people was
Yes,
getting a lot
sis.
better prices.
Malapit
And
na.
started
Sumasakit
doing
lagi
that.
yung
So I had
tiyan ko.
a few of these businesses. I was doing pretty well. By the time I met up with Ephraim, I'd been around halfway done my chemistry
Sakit
degree.
na yung tiyan
Doing
mo
pretty well
lalo.
with, I wasn't like in the movie struggling to make ends meet. They just needed a better arc.
Right.
So they wanted it to look like I was much harder down on my luck. I never took delivery of all these bed sheets I got stuck with. It was just brokering. I would just make a deal with the buyer, make a deal with the supplier, get a transferable letter of credit, and that was it. I didn't even have to finance the deal. It was great. I would just collect a commission. And I was doing this with containers of towels and bed sheets.
Hello, 29 million in the house.
I was calling. Yeah, we had mentioned something about the movie. I was like, no, that's not true. Something else. I was like, no, that's not true. But you have to understand that you've got probably 10 to 20 hours worth of screen
Dali
time.
video, Lou.
Yes,
Consolidate into-
that's exactly. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Ah,
so
ang
you have
sinigang,
to
no?
massive
Bitin.
cuts. You have to blend certain scenes together.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of storylines that.
Yeah. You have to have a classic arc also.
So you have to have a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
So the
Magulang kami kapatid,
short
Jess, kayo nagkakasang
is
gulo.
better than the, hey, I'm actually doing all right.
Nagpunta kami sa ano.
Yeah, it's a better arc. It's a better
Mercury.
dramatic
Tapos
arc.
biglang umulan ba?
So yeah, I was doing okay. I mean, I think at that point I had about $100,000 to my name, which is not bad for a college student.
Sakit naman yung ulan.
I was in your 20s,
Yeah.
early 20s.
I was 22. Yeah, I was 22. So I was doing
Hindi ako
okay.
nakatulog na maayos ko doon.
Yeah, it was completely legal. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, 100% legal.
Trumps na lang.
And that's when I bumped into Ephraim, and he was active at a
Wrong place at the wrong time.
well, you know, life is what it is. I'm pretty happy where I am now, so who knows what it would have been different, how it would have been if it had gone in a different way. But yes,
Mas
we
willing
bumped into
kita,
each
no?
other at a mutual friend's house, at a guy that was friends with both of us, that we had grown up
Stay na
together.
pala.
I first knew Ephraim when we were teenagers. We both
Gawin na
went to the
ako
same
sa
synagogue, and we would both sneak out during prayers. He's 4 years younger than me, so he was friends with guys who were 2 years younger than me that I was friends with, and that's how we got into my friend group. But then, you know, since we had worked for his uncle, BK, I think 16 or so, and I lost
Hindi na ako
contact with him
naglagay ng
when he was 18, 19 is when he came back from LA after learning the government contracting business from his uncle.
Was
Hindi
brilliant.
na ako naglagay na hindi ka nagmamalas.
Passion.
Hindi ka naman sis.
I always point out that there are
Hindi naman. Ako araw-araw ako naglalakad.
Absolutely.
Hindi
Yeah,
naman
I
ako
was the first person to say it. Yeah.
Pero yun, normal lang naman kasi nagmamalas.
Yes.
Kasi yung
I don't know if
publiko.
this is the right term, but I always thought of him as an idiot savant.
Right.
Because he's so good at certain things and he's so bad at certain things.
Yeah.
And the things he's bad at tends to ruin the things he's good at.
Anong lunch mo sis
Like
Aga?
he can't think long term. Everything's just about everything's transactional. It's always about what's this deal gonna do. He never thinks about the long term relationship, which burns everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's his Achilles heel, so to speak. But yeah, he's an amazing guy. I'll be the first. As much as I dislike him, right, and as much as he screwed
Lakad
me,
na lang lagi ko.
and stole from me, but he's an amazing person. Not many people can make millions of dollars by the time they're 18 years old on their own. And yeah, so he told me about business he was doing, and he's like, oh, you're doing a lot of things I'm doing, searching for sources overseas, arranging logistics, doing the financing with the bank, etc. I can use it out.
Depende sis.
I can use it
Kasi
out.
kung nasa posisyon naman yung baby, normal lang. Pero wala ka naman magkagawa. Kung baliktad yung bata, kailangan ng serious.
And he
Huwag
shows
naman
me his
sana.
bank account, and he had
Sobrang magalaw, sobrang
cash
talaga.
in the bank.
Kaya masakit yung tiyan ko. Lagi siya gumalaw. Naglalaro lagi ng ano. Naglalaro lagi ng football.
And
Sobrang
he
malikot siya.
shows me his bank account, and he had 1.8 million in cash in the bank. Yeah, and that he was 18 years old, and I was like, holy crap. I mean, I thought I was hot shit with my 100K.
Kaya nga, pero wala naman
And this
siyang
guy
magagawa pa
had
rin.
made mistakes of
Kung ano ba siya,
almost $2
kailangan
million,
niya serious.
and he was 18 years old. He's like, this guy knows something I don't, and
Huwag naman sana.
to learn what he knows. Yeah. So that's how I got involved with the infamous effort to provoke.
You guys start bidding on stuff right away? Like, did you drop what you were currently doing, or you're just kind of doing it like on the side? You
Right.
full time, like I'm all in.
Yung lakad lang naman
way
ako,
it
grabe
happened
ako
was, at
magpapasok.
first, the way
Kinukontrol ko lang kasi ano,
I told him, well, you know, I don't know about your
Hello,
business or
Lolita,
something,
how
but,
are you
you know,
doing?
I know you've got a lot of money, and,
Thank you so much.
show me. And I had been offered, this was right after the first Xbox had been released, and through my contacts with the SD cards, I had been offered a bunch of Xboxes at wholesale prices.
Dahil
All the stores were out of Xboxes.
Oo, hindi ako masyado
That's
kumakain.
amazing. I
I
didn't
mean,
have the money I
ito
needed
lang
to
ako
buy these
kumakain.
Xboxes. I said, hey, you want
Pero
to
kailangan talaga kumain
invest
ko.
in
Ganun.
this, and you buy a bunch
Halimbawa
of Xboxes and flip them.
Grabe ako kumain
And
pag
so, and then he
alas
went to
dos,
work on
tapos
this
after 3 hours
deal, and it was amazing to watch him work because he
Ay, hindi ako
broke through
nagsusoda.
like 5 levels of intermediaries. Like kept on going up the chain of command, like just convincing them, and you know, a middleman.
Yung rice,
only
brown
thing
rice
he's got is being a
na nakain ko,
middleman.
mix yung white
Having
rice.
a middleman give up his suppliers to you,
He just got cut out.
it's amazing he was able to do that. Yeah, not just once, but like 5 times in a row, until we got to.
Kasi gusto
So
niya.
I said, hey, you want to come
Hindi
in
naglaban
and
ako sa
invest in this
Benson
and buy a bunch of Xboxes and flip them. And then he went to work on this deal, and it was amazing to watch him work because he broke through like 5 levels of intermediaries. He kept on going up the chain of command, like just convincing them. And you know, a middleman, the only thing he's got is being a middleman. Having
Last
a
time
middleman give
nag-ano
up
ako,
his
veggies,
suppliers
fruits,
to
and
you,
meal.
He just got cut out.
Pero
it's
minsan may
amazing he
mga
was able
fruits
to do that, yeah, not just
Kinukontrol
once, but
talaga.
like 5 times in a row, until we got to he was just so convincing.
Lalo na nung first night pa lang, grabe.
And
Nakain ako ng ulo ng
we
laswab.
got to the final person.
Yung boy mo
was,
lang.
it was from the
Ilalabas ko lahat
major
yun.
electronics distributor. And every time we bumped up through the different intermediaries, the amount we had to buy got bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time we got to the like
Kaya
5th
minsan gusto
level,
ko rin
we had
kumain
to
ng
buy
healthy, pero ayaw
it was
niya.
$20
Ayaw
million
niya.
worth of Xboxes. Like, I think it was 100,000. My So we needed another $18 million. So we started looking for investors. We got like a hedge fund on the line, and he was like, "Gentlemen, we can do this deal, and I need $20 million. I'm 18 short. You guys in?" And so they were very interested because the thing was, it was going to be a letter of credit. So the bank was going to hold the money in escrow until we had spent all the merchandise. So it was not like fake, at least not that we could figure out. But the hedge fund backed out and decided they just didn't pass the smell test. Right. And I guess what they were figuring probably was, why is it that there's such a large amount of Xboxes not through the official channels? Right. Wouldn't it just go through Microsoft to Best Buy? Because we had already lined up Best Buy and Walmart. They were willing to buy the Xboxes at retail price, at like the full retail price. They were going to use it as a loss leader to get people into the door. So we were going to double that money in this $20 million deal. And so
Tumasik kanina.
And so the hedge fund decided to pass the smell test and pulled out. And I think what they thought was probably true, especially at that time, which was like late 2005. The Chinese factories were very infamous. They still do it to this day, I'm sure, but especially back then. They're infamous for doing production overruns. And so if a customer comes to them and says, "Make me, 5 million Xboxes," they'll make 5.1 million Xboxes, and then they'll sell the extra 100,000 on the gray market or really black market. They're not allowed to do that. So that's probably where they came. And so if Microsoft found out about it, could have frozen it in customs, and they're worth about $18 million. So that's probably why they turned it down. So that whole thing collapsed. And then after that whole thing collapsed, he says to me, he's like, we almost got really rich right there. Because almost made $20 million right off the bat. But why don't we do the business, my bread and butter? I know government contracting. I can teach you how to do it. Let's do bids with the government, and we'll make money that way. I'll teach you how the system works. And so he taught me how the system worked, and he was like, I'm already doing arms, so why don't you concentrate on something else? So I concentrated on fuel. When I first contracted, like a month and a half, starting to work, made $8,000. Not bad for a month and a half.
How's the weather in other provinces?
And then I was working on bigger fuel contracts, because you have to, with government contracting, you have to do smaller contracts, and working with the bigger contracts when you're getting into field grants. You can't just go for the multi-million-dollar ones. So if there's something under $100,000, you don't need the past performance, as they call it, or the proof that you've done this business before. So I was building up AUI's, which was his company's name, AUI's reputation and past performance in the fuel industry. He was like, I need your help to work on this gun parts contract, because he won this specialty gun parts for the special forces, like rare gun parts. He'd like to sort them out for different items, because the special forces train on these old historical weapons. Because if you don't know where you're going to be in the field, you're going to use the weapons that are available there.
6 miles per hour.
Updated weapons. The special forces has a collection of these old historical weapons that are hard to source. So he did it at like a very high margin, because he knew the gun industry really well. He was a gun nut. And so he knew that this was going to be a pain in the ass contract to supply. So he just put a real high number out there. Ended up winning. Didn't want to spend time sourcing on it. So he gave it to me. So I worked that for a while. Made some money on that. And then we saw, I worked on a few things that I failed at. A few vehicle contracts, some food contracts, some clothing contracts. In government contracting, you tend to lose like 10 contracts that you bid on before you win one. Unless you specialize in a specific field and you know that field really, really well, you win a higher proportion of contracts because you know what the competitive landscape is. So, I was kind of
Nakaulan na kaya, parang sabi ko nga, the range is
what we could win.
10 seconds.
And one of those contracts, like the SUV thing with like
Wala.
Heinrich for books.
Oh,
So Henry,
Yeah, Heinrich was his real name. Yeah, we call him Henry.
Kasi nilagay ko yung ano.
Introduce himself, but yeah.
Gamit
So
nilagay
we
na ano.
didn't use him. So he was the guy who played by
Tomatoes ba? Para ano lang.
He was he specialized in
Natural lang
military
ang pagkas...
so we were just using him whenever there was like, particularly Warsaw Pact military, we had really good connections all over Eastern Europe.
So the last-
So,
The last
I remember there was
vegetable
one
that
time
we
there
need to
was
add is the
the
leaves.
Indians or something that
Hmm.
wanted, or Pakistanis that wanted, somebody that wanted some special Jeep. Oh no, I think the Indians could
Okay, now.
build it for this much. And Deborah said you guys had won the bid, but then Henry had said you can get them for this much.
Hmm.
And he said, then it fell apart because he
Galing
couldn't
kay
get it for that
Jessa
much.
yan.
Right.
And he's like a whole
At
thing fell
malapit sa
apart.
Yes,
sport tumatakbo
yes, I
din ng
I'd have
bigas.
half of it.
yeah, now
Malapit
that
na
you mention it, I do
Sige,
remember
take your
that.
time
Yes,
sa
yes,
ating
that's
gusto
right.
ko.
So yeah, that was a big one. I put a lot of work
Maglalakad ka
into.
lang ba?
I guess I repressed all those painful memories.
I think
Yeah.
Hindi na ako magsasahin. Bahay na yun.
Lost money.
Bahay na yun. Kainin na ako.
Yeah,
Kasi mahirap ka
that's
na.
true. When something falls through, it's just like, then it's like, I'll never do that. And it was right, I really learned much.
Right.
So,
Nakamulit
but
na
yeah,
ako kasi
because I remember sitting with that girl and he just, he told me just,
Malapit lang nga ito. Lagi.
you were so.
Mas stress ka. Pero parang kami mag-ano ka lang. Mag-lunch ka.
Yeah, and he had won the one that was like 50 million to
Mag-lunch ka lang.
around here. And then they came back and they were like, no, you had to complete this many tasks in each individual section.
Right, then you have to compete, mini compete.
Right, and you're like,
Yeah.
I won the whole thing.
Yeah.
Furious about it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's, so, I'm sorry, you were saying, I think I kind of interrupted you.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, I mean, and then in the summer of 2006 is when we saw the solicitation for the Afghan contract.
Right.
And we saw that it was like 30 different items, each enormous amounts. Like the thing was at least 20 to 30 times bigger than anything we'd ever seen. And he says to me, he's like, hey, listen, I know that you're working on the fuel stuff and this other stuff, but I really need your help on this. I've got these 5 sources, and so don't talk to them, I'll get prices from them, but I need you to go and scour the internet and get as many news sources as you can. And so we have the best possible price for this contract. And we thought it was a really long shot because this was just a huge contract. It was massive. I mean, but we figured we had delivered these items before, so we had to pass performance. So we technically qualified for this contract, so we had to bid on it. And so I spent like a good 2 months or so.
But you're paid.
No, I was working completely on commission. I was living off my savings.
Yeah, that's.
So my 100K was dwindling.
Right.
And
But you're seeing him, during this time, you're seeing task orders getting fulfilled.
Yeah.
And huge checks are coming in.
Yes.
You're seeing him.
Yeah.
You're like, he's doing this stuff, it's not like it's a
Yeah.
pipe dream, like, no,
Right.
this is happening.
yeah, exactly. I just hadn't won anything big myself. Right. So he had most of the contracts that he was delivering on at the time, he had already won before I started working with him. So he was like working on fulfillment, and he was using me to get new business, right? Because he was busy managing all the dumpster fires he started with the other contracts.
Right.
So, and that's why he didn't want to work on the Afghan contract, on getting new sources. And he says to me, well, because we made a deal that we split the profits 50-50 for everything I worked on, because I pretty much do all the work until we won the contract, and then he would do the final negotiations of really hammering people down in price and help and check over my work and submitting it to the government to make sure I wasn't messing up. And he would do the financing, and then we would split 50-50. That was kind of the deal that we had. And he says to me, well, for this Afghan contract, this is like my bread and butter, so it's not like you're completely bringing in new business because I've got my 5 guys. So it can't be 50-50, but I'll tell you what, I'll do 25-75. I was like, okay, that's fine, that's fair, I was like, whatever,
$300 million contract.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'll take 25%, that's fine.
If you end up with a 10%, if you just made 10% profit,
Yeah,
that's a massive amount.
Exactly.
Lee, hello.
So,
Ay, hindi.
Ang saya ng kainan, pwedeng maapalan.
Chris, hello. May kilala.
Take them.
What rice?
Exactly. So, yeah, so I said, fine, no problem. And so I worked my ass off, got contacted everyone in the mother, and built a huge spreadsheet of all the prices and all the locations and the estimated shipping cost, and really massive spreadsheet of all the different aspects, the packing, configuration, so we were able to calculate logistics and all of that stuff. And we submitted the bid. Then we didn't hear from them for like 4 months, 3-4 months. I worked on other contracts, lost most of them. And then in January, they told us that we actually won the contract. They actually first did an audit, where they did 4 audits. Yeah, whereas
This woman came in.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The whole
Yeah.
comical kind of thing of how
Yeah.
it's like.
Yeah.
It's like I just didn't know how we were past this one.
Yeah.
It's like I had this. He's like my accountant had gone to federal prison or something before, and
Right. He loved that. he just loved that. That's true, his account.
But I want to jump in. I want to say something real quick that I don't think anyway. Not everybody who's going to watch this knows that. But I actually wrote. I was actually in prison with Deborah Worley,
Right.
and I wrote
The baby
his
also
memoir,
complains.
So it was Once a Gun Runner.
Right.
That's why like a lot of stuff like what you and I are talking about is
Right.
really the story, not the movie. You know what I'm saying? Because
Right.
the movie, people are like, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That's what they're probably thinking the truth. But I mean, I sat with Deborah Worley for, 40 to 80, probably 80 hours or
Wow.
Which he was never once on time.
Oh,
Never one time.
He's never been on time in his life.
I remember going, one time he was supposed to meet me, waited there for 30 minutes, and I was like, okay. Because he always promised he'd be there. Went there, found him in the unit, in his housing unit, and he was in the middle of arguing with a Muslim guy who stole apples out of the prison cafeteria. And the Muslim guy, he wanted 2 stamps for 2 apples, and Beverly wanted to give him 2 stamps for 3 apples. And I walked up, and I could hear him arguing, walking in the unit, walk over to his cell, and sat there for 5 minutes, going like this. And then after about 5 minutes, like, what the fuck are we doing, bro? And he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, forget it, I don't want to be, you're right here. And I'm like, you were supposed to meet me 45 minutes ago. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he got up, and it was like, what are you doing? You don't care that you stood me up again.
Right.
And you're arguing over a stamp.
Yeah.
With the guy, by the way, that got 30 years for hijacking a plane.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's already placed like
He loves to win.
He loves it. It's all about that. It's all. My favorite story, that very similar to yours, was early on when I first started working with him. I heard him get on the phone with AT&T and arguing about like a $5 overage for like 45 minutes. For 45 minutes. And he already had millions of dollars in the bank. And I told him, but like, he's like yelling and screaming and demanding to speak to the manager and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, it's $5.
Right.
Why do you care? Exactly.
You made $1,000 or $2,000.
Yeah, that's what I told him. And he says, it's the principle of the matter. Nobody fucks me. Nobody fucks me.
He really only seemed happy with the deal if he felt he had gotten over on the other person. He wasn't even about like a win-win situation, look up something out of what he wanted. It was, no, I need to get over on you.
Yeah.
If you walk away happy, I fucked up.
Exactly. That was how he worked. I mean, Yeah. I mean, I saw him destroy people. I saw him because he always managed to like maneuver it in like sneaky ways. Like he would promise things over the phone and then go back on his word about the amount he was gonna buy or the timeline or whatever. Like he always managed to maneuver something.
Ano kasi maglalaro pa si Dana po
I
mo?
was talking to a guy and the guy was like literally crying on the phone and he was like,
Huh?
if you do this, I don't remember the exact details.
Sabi niya mag-workout. Sabi niya mag-workout pa daw.
Speakerphone on, so you could hear both sides of the conversation.
Sila ba?
And
Nakakapit
the
mo.
guy was like, if you do this, you're gonna ruin my
Ano
business.
oras yung kanina na tumawag siya?
Like my kids in the hospital and all this stuff. Like the guy was really sobbing on the phone. And
Saan sila sa...
it's just so that it's not business. And he just like hands up and he's like, well, I got another 3% of the deal. Nice. Just like that.
I'm still cooking lunch.
Yeah. It's for 3%. He was willing to do just hold that on this guy. Yeah. It was,
No, this is for lunch because we just came back from the Mercury Dance Store.
Yeah.
We bought stuff.
Flashbacks. So yeah, we win the contract, and at first he says to me, he's like, David,
Okay.
amazing job doing all this sourcing. We couldn't have wanted without you.
Okay, yeah, for sure we're ready to finish eating.
Major money makers in the contract with one of my sources.
Because I will swim later too.
And
Okay.
we're gonna make so much money off this contract. I want you to
In an hour, actually. I said, yeah, for
I
sure.
want you to manage the thing. So he tells
You
me,
finished?
I said to him, like, you're not gonna help me manage it. You're the expert here, right? He's like, no. The contract with one of my sources, area company that made the name, and we're gonna make so much money off this contract. I want you to run the entire contract. I want you to manage it. So I said to him, like, you're not gonna help me manage it. I'm the expert here, right? He's like, no, further business. We're really rocking and rolling now. This is just the beginning. And I said, maybe we should concentrate on the $300 million deal we just won.
And just for the sake of clarity, that deal, it's not like, hey, we have to get the entire $300 million before we get paid. They send task force. They said, right now we need, 500,000 AK-47 rounds and, 1,500 whatever, MMA or grenades and this. So we have a task force, and that task force is worth $6 million. And then you fulfill that. As soon as that's done, they pay you. And then the next one is, this one's for 15, we want $2 million. And sometimes it's 2 and 3 task forces. So it's not like you're waiting 3 years to fulfill it and get the money. No, millions of dollars is coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not like, hey, you take this and he ends up pulling it off, great. It's not never at him.
Right.
These are deals that are coming in. This is going to bankrupt the company. I got 3 years worth of fucking deals here.
Yeah, exactly. And it was 20 times bigger than anything he'd ever won in his entire business history.
Right.
So I said, we should concentrate on this cash cow we just won. And he said, well, I'm going after more business. You handle this yourself. And I said, okay, look, if you insist, I think it's the wrong move, but if you insist, I'll do it. And so
if you didn't fulfill those orders,
right,
and you fell short, then you could lose his standing, and not be able to bid on anything, or get suspended, or whatever.
And he's financing it, so his money's on the line, right? Not just his money on the line, but also his investors' money on the line. Ralph.
When he tried so hard to explain it. It was just like no matter how many times,
Yes.
and I was like, but we're over this much money.
Okay.
You don't understand all that. I think, no, that's the problem. I do understand. So,
Poor Ralph. I felt so bad for Ralph. I really did.
I love the, I love to see, it's funny that in the movie, you guys go, they kind of got
Right. No.
And it was Rock Island.
Rock Island,
Did you go with them?
I didn't go. He he went with Ralph, actually.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
because he wanted someone older there, right, yeah, because he would look so young, so he wanted someone young, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Because
yeah,
mechanics
I can
also
see that,
like,
yeah.
sometimes it's
So he
really
went with Ralph,
painful.
convinced them to approve the contract. They sent their auditors down to the office after a big scramble to create a whole bunch of fake accounting. You know,
We'll check.
on it.
We'll check later. What time, ah?
Maybe like an hour or so, so give us a call later.
Okay.
That had an appraised value of like, whatever, like $20 million to Ralph had bought for like 1.5 million.
Yeah.
And it would be worth $20. It didn't have the zoning. But the auditor just saw the property's worth. Like, didn't really, I guess, go through it well enough to realize, like, hey, this is kind of a subject to rezoning. Which Ralph had been turned down twice for. It wasn't getting the zoning.
Yeah.
But it had it said it was worth. Gave them, one of the things they had to have a certain amount of money, they gave them. Did you go with them?
I didn't go.
They go with us. Oh, they had two others for next. So,
Yeah. Poor Ralph. I felt so bad for Ralph. I really did.
I love this.
Actually, it's not a great one. Also, the Jessa and the partner can join us.
Like, you guys go like.
Right. No.
Just to set the water for the rain.
Did you go with them?
I didn't go. He went with Ralph, actually.
They go with us. Oh, they had two others for next. So, how many times, you know, and I always loved them, like, yeah, like, you know, go with the guy that's so much money, who, you know, he was like, you don't understand, I'm thinking, oh, that, oh, they had two others for next. So,
Yeah. Poor Ralph. I felt so bad for Ralph. I really did.
I love the, I love the scene. It's funny that in the movie, like, you guys go like.
There's a low pressure
you know,
that's
right,
fine.
no, it was the wrong guy.
Yeah, Rock Island, yeah.
But with them,
I didn't go. He went with Ralph, actually.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
because he wanted
Oh, we
someone
can
older,
announce.
right, yeah, because he would look so young, so he wanted another young guy, but yeah, so yeah, but
I can see that, that makes sense.
yeah, so he went with Ralph, convinced them to approve the contract. They sent their auditor down to the office after a big scramble to create a whole bunch of fake accounting, you know, and get past the audit. So,
One of the things they had to have a certain amount of money, they gave the auditors an appraisal
yeah,
that had an appraised value of like, whatever, like $20 million to Ralph had bought for like 1.5 million.
yeah,
And it would be worth $20.
Right.
It didn't have the zoning. But the auditor just saw the property's worth. Like, didn't really, I guess, go through it well enough to realize like, hey, this is kind
Okay,
of
man din ang
a
tulog sila.
subject
Kami
to
kamot.
right,
rezoning, which Ralph had been turned down twice for. So it wasn't getting the zoning,
yeah,
but it had it said it was worth.
Naglakad kami kasunod.
yeah.
So they took that.
Sa
They
ulit
whatever,
lang
I don't know, if it was 20, it might have been five.
No, it was about, I think, $18-20 million, yeah, I think so, yeah.
I mean, it's still, they got five, they got them hard.
Yeah, and another amazing thing during the financial audit, they wanted to see that, or during past performance audit, one of the documents that were submitted was a permit to import, I think it was 20 million AK-47 rounds into the U.S. He got that import license approved, then the deal fell through, so it never actually happened. But he still had that copy of the documents of that import permit approved, so he used that as proof to show that he had imported 20 million rounds into the United States, but it never happened. Yeah. So yeah,
I'm not gonna sit there and listen to you say that he did something underhanded. Absolutely, yeah.
A permit to import, I think it was 20 million AK-47 rounds into the U.S.
Right.
He got that import license approved, then the deal fell through. So it never actually happened. But he still had that copy of the documents of that import permit approved. So he used that as proof to show that he had imported 20 million rounds into the United States, but it never happened. Yeah. So yeah,
I'm not gonna sit here and listen to you say that he did something underhanded. Absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
well, you've experienced it yourself, so.
You know, everybody's like, guys were like, you know, was he really like, the Jonah Hill killer character? I was like, no.
No.
He's like, wait, where's like Jonah Hill man? He seems soft and calm.
Yes, absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
10 times worse.
Yeah, much worse. Yeah.
You know, but he, you know, Tuesday, there was one time, honestly, I just fucking laughed out.
Yeah,
he's very charming. He could be funny and say stuff.
He's just very charming and funny. He is very funny. Yeah, that's one of his talents that he can, you know,
Right.
it's just like where he can knife you right in the back. He's slapping you on the back until he knifes you in the back. That's how he is. He's very good at it. He's very good at it. You got contract, you got fingers on putting the task orders right in. Yeah, so the task orders, so we first get a $600,000 task order. And we were just that we had, where is this contract? We thought that they were giving this like $600,000 task order as a test, but the task order wasn't big enough for us to fill the entire aircraft load.
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of
deliver on
tips,
that profit. We wanted to try to deliver on that, so we were
Always
freaking out.
paying
We're going on some alternate transportation. Then like a week and a half later, we got a $15 million task order. We're like, okay, they're actually serious about this. They're giving up. They're actually going to award this huge contract to us. And so we're scrambling. Efforts, of course, renegotiating.
Ano lunch mo kapatid?
As
Late
he
na yung
does.
lunch mo.
And,
Masarap siya.
and
Paborito na yun.
this classic
Last time na nagluto ako,
strategies was
kaya natuto,
take
hindi na ako kumain siya.
competitors' quotes and like change the prices on them, and then send it to other people and say, look, I got a better price from this guy, so you gotta be in, right? And he would do that with everyone and see how low he could like knock them
Nakulang
down.
yung kapatid.
And I would say I had another one that he told me about this. He did.
Update ang tayo.
He did on like helmets or something.
Yeah.
And he got the price based on 10,000 helmets.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Classic. Yeah. So he's got the manufacturer thinking, I'm gonna work 10,000. And they're like, okay, fine. This is the best we can do it. You know, it's an amazing price.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he says, okay, the first order you're asking for is 2,000. You're gonna ask me for 2,000 every month or every 2 weeks. So give me the first two. He gives the first 2,000, we pay them. And then we call them up and say, hey, we're ready to ship the next 2,000 away. And they can't contract. They weren't happy with your product, or they weren't happy. Like you blanking it out, or is it, you know, the government, I don't know what happened, or and they were like,
Today, dito sa Babaw,
price based
sa
on
bahay,
10,000. What do you want me to do? I can't look at it.
nawala sa bahay. Ay, grabe naman, namiss ka na ng bahay mo.
So that was
Madami kasi expense ko naman sa kaya cheese
yeah,
mo.
inflate the prices to infinite quantities to get prices and then structure the deal in a way that he was able to leave something in his way out of further orders.
Dami dumaan na test ko din dito sa kapitbahay.
This was really right now.
Sa kapitbahay, sa kabilang barrio.
Equivalent product. Yes. Like he's doing contracts, like you could provide a
Bahay lang.
product. So he's bidding on, you know, Nike sniper rifles, which are $4,500 a piece.
Marami na rin expense na dumaan din sa SF. Madami mga
And the,
bagong
production.
production. Tapos mga
Now he's gonna do
mga artista.
10,000.
Hindi na rin
The government gets 10,000. But then he comes back and says, listen, I can't fulfill the order by the time you want, either you guys work on, or we can give you, the contract says we can give you an equivalent product. We've got like South Korean Panther rifles that are $1,500, and whatever yours go to rifle, I mean, we all
Dito
think
parang
that.
papasok mo siya.
And they argue with Panther to get them down to like $1,100.
Tignan ko
And then he provides all
yes,
the,
the next
and he makes a massive
Oh,
amount.
very no.
Like, at some point,
Tapos mag-birthday ka na yung
everyone I said, yeah, but like they wanted this,
Sabi ko, baka sila tumawag ng
and he started laughing and he goes, oh, I have no doubt that they would have been more happy with the night. He started laughing and he started laughing, that gun roll.
Kasi baka grabe na talaga siya gumalaw.
$100,000 on that deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is somebody is you're gonna hit somebody twice. But and then his whole thing was that the government's so massive. Right. They're buying so many different places, like what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
ago.
his reputation will eventually get around, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That was, he would brag about that. He did that exact substitution, and I remember with the M249 machine guns, he substituted for the K3 Korean machine gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, into the State Department. Yeah. He did like $1 million or something like that. That's something insane.
Tapos
Yeah.
sila yung ano, kasi.
Yeah. And
One time.
well, the thing is that he
Asim.
as far as I can tell, what he did was
Tinikitter na 6 na ang graph.
Insisted, I was like, that's not it. I
Mas
said,
gusto ko
I mean,
yun.
it's sneaky.
Uy, mas maganda pa ako sa Ano ka ba? It's just this number. Okay lang.
Right. I mean,
Importante i-enjoy lang natin eh.
switch.
They're not gonna, but
Legally,
yeah, it's unless they can, unless they
Enjoy
can.
lang natin yung pagiging pagkasad ba.
and he was pretty sloppy. I wouldn't be surprised if he left a trail.
Naamoy
As
ko.
far as I can tell, what he did was
Parang natutuwa
Yeah,
na
no,
siya.
he was insisting, I was like, that's not it. I said, I mean, it's sneaky. He went to Vegas. It is Vegas.
Pero kailangan ko nalagay itong
Right.
Insisting, I was like, that's not it. I said,
siguro lang
I
kung
mean,
kulay,
it's
26
sneaky. He went to
pesos
Vegas.
lang.
It is Vegas.
Isang ano na, isang bag na siya ba? Isang bag.
It's not a
Parang
child.
110 lang yata yun. Repair na,
I
madami
mean,
na.
in reality, it's a big switch.
Yeah, it's
Ano
not,
talaga?
they're not gonna, but
Legally,
yeah, it's unless they can.
Yeah, uy, now lang ako nakabisito sa probinsya na itong kantong Saradas City sa nakarating kami ng City last day. Kahapon lang kami umuwi. Oh, sana all. Ano lang, enjoy lang. Enjoy lang ba? Basta may chance, go lang. Ano, malapit na. Marami, di ba? Just kapatid yan, may flight na papunta dyan, may flights ko sa atin. Uy, sana all. Hindi makapasyal ka na dito sa Iloilo. Madami dito pasyalan kapatid. Gawa ka ng content.
Get his competitors to give him the price
Tapos
that they bid
makagalak-galak mo lang.
over the phone, and so he could undercut them. And
Madami ng mga
I think that
open
really
flights
admires
sa
that
Iloilo, kahit international, meron na rin sila.
And he would like,
Singapore,
Star 67 or whatever it was.
It's not using a
Yeah.
server to say US military.
Exactly. You can easily see what number it called from. It's like associated with him online. He just didn't cover his tracks at all. So it always shocked me that he got away with it.
Asin, sarap.
There's so many things that they could have gotten
Nasahod
on.
ni Lolo,
But it actually
malaki.
surprised me at how
Ewan
few
ko pagkano
charges
yung
and
pamasahe.
convinced once they went
Kasi
through
sa
all
Manila, ano eh.
Yeah. So, at what
Depende kung
point,
kailan ka lang
once you,
mag-go.
once
Kasi
you
mas
guys
matagal, mas mura eh.
have won, you know, the contract,
Yeah.
you're, and, you know, I mean, I know the movie focuses on the AK-47s,
Yeah.
rounds,
Mas maganda mag-check na ng price mga ano, every Sunday.
that is the issue.
Tuesday at Tuesday, Friday.
Yes, like, you know, you're cheap enough, he explained to me that
Okay.
you live in Omaha.
Yes, that's right.
They didn't have a huge margin.
Right.
And so you guys were sourcing them all over the place, didn't you? And I'm clear, I mean, I have to break out the book, but did you go to, did you go?
No, so I didn't go to Albania. We sent, we sent Alex for his
Gusto na ba tayo?
So what happened was we were sourcing things from all over Eastern Europe. The AK-47 rounds were coming out of Albania. They were from a deal that Henry had set up for us.
Right.
And we realized at the time, this was in early 2007, there was a huge spike in oil prices, and we wanted to make these calls. And this really goes all the way, I believe, to the dark side. As far as I can tell, what he did was,
Yeah, I know, he was insisting, I was like, that's not it. I said, I mean, it's sneaky. He went to Vegas.
it is
It's like a bait and switch. He said, no. And he tried to it's like a child, you know?
Right. I mean, in reality, it's a big switch.
They're not gonna, but
Update lang kasi.
yeah, it's
Update lang.
Unless they can prove
Malapit na ako
their
mga anak.
prior intent. And Yeah, he was pretty sloppy. I wouldn't be surprised if he left a trail of prior to him. So, yeah. One thing he would do. They actually showed this thing in the movie. Where, this really goes all the way, I believe, to the dark side. Maybe. He would pretend to be a contracting officer, and he would call up his competitors and say, "Oh, there's a glitch in our system. I need to enter the numbers by hand. Can you just give me that price that you bid on this contract?" And he would get his competitors to give him the price that they bid over the phone, and so he could undercut them. And the thing that really blew my mind is that he used his cell phone to make these calls, and he would star 67 or whatever it was.
Not using a server to say U.S. military.
Exactly. You can easily see what number called from, and it's like associated with him online.
Yeah.
He didn't cover his tracks at all. So it always shocked me that he got away with it. But there's so many things that they could have gotten him on. That it actually surprised me at how few charges they ended up bringing against him once they went through all his emails and everything.
Yeah. So at what point, like once you guys have won, the contract, you're and you focus on the AK-47 rounds, the 6.62 rounds. That there's an issue getting the rounds.
Yes.
Like you're right, you're cheaping up. I understand that he explained to me that you really
Yes.
that he didn't have a huge margin.
Right.
And so you guys were sourcing them all over the place, didn't you?
Right.
And I'm
These
clear.
are ice cream.
I have to break out the book or not, but did you go to Albania? Did you go?
No, so I didn't go to Albania. We sent we sent Alex to Albania. So what happened was we were sourcing things from all over Eastern Europe. The AK-47 rounds were coming out of Albania. They were from a deal that Henry had set up for us. And we realized at the time, this was in early 2007, there was a huge spike in oil prices. And because were airshipping everything to Afghanistan, the air freight had gone up so much that we were underwater on that aspect of the contract. We were going to lose money on these shipments. And so I had the idea, I told that from, this ammo these crates are packed in heavy wooden crates, ammo. And they're inside these sardine cans, which are metal sealed canisters, and those are inside these thick wooden crates. And I told them, if we remove the wooden crates, we could probably save a bunch of weight, and we'll save a bunch of money on air freight. And he was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. We have to find out how much those crates weigh." And he's like, "Well, we can't really trust the Albanians to give us numbers. We need a guy for it." And he said to me, he's like, "I need you here in Miami. You're taking care of the government stuff. I need you in the office managing the contract out because I'm still, we go after these other contracts. And so we need to get someone to go over there." At the time, Alex is one of my best friends, and we grew up together. It was actually at his house that Ephraim and I bumped into each other when I started the whole thing. And so Alex had done a stint in the French military. He has French citizenship. And he was looking for a job, and he was looking for experience. And so I suggested, why don't we send Alex? He has some military experience. He speaks 3 languages, not Albanian, but he knows his way around. So we sent Alex to Albania, and the day after he gets to Albania, he calls me up and he's like, "Bro, all the ammo here is Chinese, right?" And I said, what are you talking about here in Albania? And he's like, no, there's Chinese markings on all the crates. And he sends me pictures by email, admissible evidence. And I tell Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, "Holy shit, this is terrible," because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition could be delivered either directly or indirectly. That was the phrase in our contract. And that was put in there, we assume, in reference to the embargo, which was placed on China in 1989 due to the Tiananmen Square. But the ammo had been given to Albania by the Chinese in the 70s. So we figured, well, it probably doesn't violate the terms of the embargo because you could buy Chinese AK-47s in the United States legally as long as it was imported before 1989, because it was imported while it was legal, so it remains legal.
Hadn't you guys already shipped some of it?
So I think the first aircraft load we shipped was actually Albanian. It was Albanian ammo, but there wasn't, apparently, according to the Albanians, not that much of it. Most of their ammo was Chinese.
Right.
So the next thing that they were going to ship, they were going to ship the Chinese ammo, and Ephraim was like, oh, maybe I can get a waiver from the State Department. He emails the State Department, and they say, no, you can't do anything. You can't ship this stuff. But I think that what he actually asked was, is there a waiver in the law? I forgot his exact terminology he used. Is that where if the ammo has been in a third country for more than 5 years, that would be allowable under the embargo. They said there's no such provision in the law. Right. He didn't want to ask something too specific because he didn't want to tip them off. Right. Alex told me later that he had met with a State Department official in Albania, and the State Department, the U.S. State Department official told him, oh yeah, that ammo was all originally from China. It's a good thing that you guys are finding a good use for it. Right. He was totally on board. He was totally, if he didn't bat an eyelash.
Yeah, I wrote that scene as well.
Yeah.
Because, I like to listen. I read it pretty much in every.
Ating tama lang.
Chinese.
Right.
Ang dilaw!
Oh,
Are you shocked?
I'm so afraid. I was terrified. I was so afraid. I was
It's so
terrified.
dark.
Huh?
Because it's so dark.
Chinese. So the next
Awesome.
thing that they were going to ship, they wanted to ship the Chinese ammo.
Dumi na ano ko.
And
Nakalsitan about
and
the
Ephraim was
people.
like, oh, maybe I can get a waiver from the State Department. He emails the State Department, and they say, no, you can't do anything.
I
You
use
can't
the
ship
meat
this
for
stuff.
pork. Ay,
But I think
pamilong
that
to.
what he actually asked was,
Kasi wala siyang ano.
is there
Wala siyang
like a waiver in the law, I forgot his exact terminology,
Hindi kasi gusto
is that where if the ammo has been in a third country for more than 5 years, that would be allowable under the embargo. They said there's no such provision in the law. Right. He didn't want to ask something too specific because he didn't want to tip them off. Right. Alex told me later that he had met with a State Department official in Albania, and the State Department, the U.S. State Department official told him, oh
8
yeah,
minutes.
that ammo is all originally from China. It's a good thing that you guys are finding a good use for it.
Right.
He was totally on board. He was totally, if he didn't bat an eyelash.
Yeah.
The State Department emails the State Department, and they say, no, you can't do anything. You can't ship this stuff. But I think that what he actually asked was, is there a waiver in the law? I forgot his exact terminology he used. Is that where if the ammo has been in a third country for more than 5 years, that would be allowable under the embargo. They said there's no such provision in the law. Right. He didn't want to ask something too specific because he didn't want to tip them off. Right. Alex told me later that he had met with a State Department official in Albania, and the State Department, the U.S. State Department official told him, oh yeah, that ammo is all originally from China. It's a good thing that you guys are finding a good use for it. Right. He was totally on board. He was totally, if he didn't bat an eyelash.
Yeah, I wrote that scene in the book.
Yeah.
Because, I like to listen. I read pretty much every single piece of Discovery.
Yeah.
And he had 12 boxes underneath his bed and
Oh, wow.
multiple.
Yeah.
So I read all of the, all the interviews, and they interviewed that guy, and
Yeah.
so they knew kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's very spooky. He was very, he was like, he seemed like he was CIA, State Department, but it's
Right, but they always
have
have
CIA kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Iran-Contra style.
Yeah. He never should have asked. Like if he was just not asked, he just kept shipping it.
Yeah.
And then they said, hey, he said, oh, no, it's okay this. Well, that doesn't work. Oh, my bad.
Right.
He could have, he could have stopped doing it.
Right.
But, yeah.
Right. But instead, he decided that what we're going to do is we're going to repackage the ammo.
Right.
and hide the fact that it's Chinese.
Right.
And so he had Alex find a box manufacturer, a cardboard box manufacturer in Tirana, in Albania, and asked him to Trubishka, Costa Trubishka, I think is the Albanian pronunciation.
Yeah, I was educated.
Yeah.
I didn't go through.
Yeah, I mean, it's I only know because I heard it from people from Alex, so who actually talked to me. But, so yeah, so Costa owned a box factory, a cardboard box factory, and because we were gonna need a whole bunch of cardboard boxes and we're to do this repackaging. And so he asked him for a quote on the labor. And Costa said I could do the whole thing for about $100,000. And we were gonna save about $3 million worth of transportation costs on this by doing this repackaging. So we were obviously in. It's a no-brainer. So just from the weight alone, we were gonna repackage it regardless. But because of the Chinese issue, we had to make sure to remove the metal tins and the documentation that was inside the tins. And
all the Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. And there was an email that went, that the government, of course, used later, where it said, make sure that all the Chinese documentation is removed.
Not that we're doing anything wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Costa starts to repackage the ammo, and we start shipping into Kabul, and everything's going great. Oh, and before we shipped it, Ephraim had me write the receiving officer in Kabul, asking him if it was okay if we would deliver it in this new configuration.
Right.
And the reason we gave was, well, we want to make sure to inspect the ammo, to make sure it's all high quality.
Right.
And therefore we have to take it out of the tins in order to inspect it. And is it okay with these are really strong double-walled corrugated cardboard, and et cetera. So it'll be fine. And also wrapped in plastic to prevent against corrosion. And the receiving officer said, yeah, sure, no problem, great idea. You know, that configuration is fine. So we got permission from the government in order to deliver in this in the new cardboard box configuration. We started shipping into Kabul. Started shipping like 3 aircraft loads a week, plus the grenade shipments, which started to go once a week. So everything's starting to go smooth. The money is rolling, and everything's starting to go well. And then I stopped coming into the office as much because I don't have to work 18-hour days anymore, and I'm just like managing the contract as I should be doing. And then one day, Ephraim comes into my office after everyone else had left. There were around 15 employees at this point. And he goes to me, he's like, you know, some guys around the office have been saying that you're not really pulling your weight around. And I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And the contract's going well. And he's
Just
like,
kidding,
yeah,
hello.
you're not
How
helping
are you
out
doing?
the Iraq contracts.
Thanks
I said,
for
I'm not part of the Iraq contracts. So why should I help on that part?
my live
He's like,
stream.
well, you know, if
Let's
those contracts fail, the company can go down, and that takes your Afghan contract with it. So you have to help make sure the company survives. And I said, oh, so you want to get me a piece of the company? Because I'm only getting a piece on what I work on. And he's like, oh, don't be ridiculous. But he's like, well, you know, I'll tell you what. I'm only going to make you this offer because you're my best friend. I would never even consider making this to anyone except for you. But I'll tell you what. I'll give you a $100K salary as a vice president of the IAY, and you get 1% of the company.
Right now,
And I
it's
said to him, well, you know, the Afghan contract is going to make us at least 90.
yeah, it's always hungry.
I'll give you a $100K salary as a vice president of the IAY, and you get 1% of the company.
Then soon he will.
And I said to him, well, you know, the Afghan contract is going to make us at least 90% of the money for the next 2 years.
Right.
And I'm supposed to get 25% of that. So I think I'll stick with our original agreement instead of going from 25% to 1%.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you know, take it or leave it. And I said, go fuck yourself and see you in court.
Right.
And I left, and that was the last day I worked at AEY.
Was he basically was saying you take it or get out?
Yeah, that's what he was saying, was take it or leave it. You know,
Okay.
like he wasn't he was like, take 1% or to the vote, or you get 0. That's what he said. So, so I said, well, I'll see you in court. And so I quit. And that was really, really hard because I'd been living on my savings.
Yeah.
And my savings were dwindling very rapidly. And all the money that I made with contracts prior to this, he insisted on rolling into the next contract because the way what he said, he's like, hey, listen, you know, it's not fair. I'm financing a contract. If you make money, you should at least finance what you're able to finance, right? Because, you know,
25%, that's where your 75% is, because you're financing the contract.
right. So, he's like,
He can't stand
yeah, he can't stand
He
it.
doesn't want to give anybody $1.
Not anything.
Even doesn't matter if you earn $5, he will give you $1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he doesn't want to give you anything. So, and of course he kept on insisting. I'm like, you know what? Fine. Yeah. And he just wore me down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fine, I'll take it. And I'll still make millions of dollars, so I thought. And until eventually, so he kept on rolling all the money that I had won previously into the new contract. So I was still living off my original savings, which were greatly decreased because I've been working for a year and a half on this primarily. And so,
Do you have a name for
so
the
after I
baby
quit,
yet?
I was like, I
Yes.
went from like, oh, I think I'm going to be making millions in the next few years to
My mama
holy
had
shit,
9
I'm
of
about
us,
to
so
go bankrupt. I'm about
this
to go broke.
long.
And
Yeah,
this time
even
I
us,
had,
we're
my
like
daughter
5.
was
Yeah,
6 months
we are
at
5.
this point. And so
And
it
it's
wasn't
all
just me, I
normal.
had to like support a kid.
Right.
And
It's fun
I went from like going,
because every
I'm
time
about to be a multi-millionaire.
my dad is always
Right.
fishing.
And
So
I
every
just
time he came home, there's
wore me
there's no
down.
baby.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fine, I'll take it. And I'll still make millions of dollars. So I thought. And until eventually, so he kept on rolling all the money that I had won previously into the new contract. So I was still living off my original savings, which were greatly decreased because I was working for a year and a half on this primarily. And so, so after I quit, I went from like, oh, I think I'm going to be making millions in the next few years to holy shit, I'm about to go bankrupt, I'm about to go broke. At this time, I had, my daughter was 6 months at this point. And so it wasn't just me, I had to like support a kid.
Right.
And I went from like going, I'm about to be a multi-millionaire,
So
I'm about
fun.
to go broke.
Right.
Do you have a name
And
for the
I
baby
just,
yet?
it was a
We
really,
have name
really
now.
hard time in my life. I was like,
Yeah.
it was really,
It's related to.
I was like super depressed for like a good 2 weeks. I just couldn't get out of it. My friends told me that they'd never seen me in a worse condition than that. Kept on negotiating with the girl. He, of course, kept on hammering me down. And eventually we agreed to a few $100K, which was a fraction of what he owed me, like 10% at most of what he owed me. But I just wanted enough money to survive,
Yeah.
so I could get into something else.
Right.
And I was like, you know what, I'll put all, yes, I'm not going to make millions, at least I'll be able to go from here. I won't go bankrupt, I'll still be able to support my kid, I'll be able to use a few $100K, do well, and go into something else. And I figured, oh, I know government contracting.
Awesome.
Why don't I start my own company? I have all these contacts.
Right.
I know how the whole system works.
Isn't the problem this was because you guys were buddies, it was just an agreement. You didn't have it like in the movie,
Yeah.
tears up the contract, and the
So-
whole thing, but.
There actually was. That's actually more true than you would think.
Okay.
Oh.
Because we,
Sour.
at first everything was verbal, but he kept on trying to renegotiate the contract, so when there was finally, I was like, you know what, okay, fine, we'll accept. Yeah, but this really is like the third time he tried to renegotiate it. I was like, I'll accept this renegotiation, but we're putting this in writing and it's not changing.
Right.
And no more negotiations. Into something else.
Right.
And I was like, you know what, I'll put all, yes, I'm not gonna make millions, at least I'll be able to go from here, I won't go bankrupt, I'll still be able to support my kid, I'll be able to use a few $100K, do well, and go into something else. And I figured, oh, I know government contracting, why don't I start my own company? I have all these contacts,
Right.
I know how the whole system works.
Isn't the problem this was because you guys were buddies, it was just like an agreement. You didn't have it like in the movie,
Yeah.
tears up the contract, and the
So-
whole thing, but.
There actually was. That's actually more true than you would think. because we at first everything was verbal, but he kept on trying to renegotiate the contract. So when there was finally, I was like, you know what? Okay, fine, we'll accept. You know, this is like the third time he tried to renegotiate it.
Right.
I was like, I'll accept this renegotiation, but we're putting this in writing and it's not changing.
Right.
And then we'll make renegotiations. So we had a handwritten contract that we both signed, very specific about what he owed me. And I tried to scan it in my scanner. My scanner was broken. I put it on my table, and I was planning on getting my scanner fixed so I could like email it to myself to be able to keep a copy. And then like 2 days later, it disappeared. Shortly before he walked into my office to tell me that he was screwing me.
Yeah.
So yeah, and he was the only guy who was coming over to my apartment. I mean, there was like nobody else who could have taken this. So we lived in the same building. So yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anything else having happened to it. So I think he did actually take the gun. And like 2 days later, it disappeared. Shortly,
So dark.
we had a handwritten contract that we both signed, very specific about what he owed me. And I tried to scan it in my
I
scanner.
love this live stream, guys. See you
Scanner
the
was
next
broken.
one.
I put
Thank
it
you
on my
again, everyone,
table.
for joining.
And I meant to, I was planning on getting my scanner fixed.
9 million
email it to
thank you,
myself to
okay.
be able to
Bye.
keep a copy. And then like 2 days later, it disappeared. Shortly before.